Arizona mountains hide something impossible. Beneath red rock peaks and desert highlands lie fossils of ocean predators and underwater gardens, creatures that swam where mountains now stand. This is not science fiction. This is Arizona's buried past brought back to life. At number 10, we have brachiopods, the shells that fooled everyone for centuries. They look exactly like clams sitting in limestone. But these marine filter feeders were completely different animals with two unequal shells protecting a bizarre feeding organ called a lofo for that, captured food from ancient currents. Arizona's mountains contain limestone, absolutely packed with these shells. The Kaibab limestone stretches across the Grand Canyon and surrounding peaks. Every single layer tells the same wild story. Warm, shallow seas completely flooded this land between 540 and 250 million years ago during the Paleozoic era. Brachiopods anchored themselves to the seafloor, or buried their bodies partially in soft sediment. Their feeding structures filtered ocean water constantly, pulling nutrients from the currents. The sheer number of fossils reveals something stunning about this place. Arizona once supported thriving underwater ecosystems with crystal-clear oxygen-rich waters. These creatures completely dominated the ancient seafloor for hundreds of millions of years. When you hike through Arizona mountains today and spot shell fossils embedded in the rock face, you are staring at direct evidence of oceans that vanished long before dinosaurs walked the earth. The limestone itself formed from countless generations of these animals living and dying in the same spot. Their shells piled up on the ocean bottom layer after layer, century after century. What appears now as solid mountain rock was once a living seafloor covered in feeding brachiopods, swaying gently in prehistoric currents. Different species filled totally different ecological roles in these ancient seas. Some preferred deeper water environments, while others clustered in the warm shallows near the surface. The variety preserved in Arizona formations shows these prehistoric seas were just as diverse and complex as modern coral reefs. Brachiopods still exist in oceans today, but are nowhere near as common or successful. They were pushed to the margins by mass extinction events that completely reshaped life on Earth. Arizona mountains preserve their golden age frozen forever in stone. But this is just the beginning. Coming in at number 9 is crinoids, creatures that looked exactly like underwater flowers swaying on long stems. People called them sea lilies because of their plant appearance. But that name is totally misleading. They were animals, close relatives of modern sea stars and sea urchins that hunted microscopic prey. Each crinoid had a long stem anchored firmly to the seafloor below. A cup-shaped body sat at the top, with feathery arms extending outward in all directions. Those delicate arms caught tiny food particles drifting through the water column. Imagine entire underwater meadows of these flower animals carpeting the ancient ocean floor. Arizona's Paleozoic limestone contains fossilized crinoid stems that look like perfect stacks of stone discs. During the Mississippian period around 360 to 320 million years ago, crinoids exploded in population numbers. They became so ridiculously abundant their skeletons formed thick limestone deposits that still exist in mountains today. Mountain regions across Arizona, including the Mogollon Rim and areas near Flagstaff, contain rock layers made almost entirely of crinoid fragments. Millions upon millions of stem segments compressed together over unimaginable time. Walk through these areas and you are literally stepping on an underwater garden turned to stone. These creatures created vast underwater forests that stretched for miles across the seafloor. Each individual crinoid filtered water through its feathery arms, but together entire colonies processed enormous amounts of ocean water. They kept the ancient seas clean and supported complex food webs around them. The preservation quality in some Arizona formations is remarkable. You can see the individual segments that made up their stems, the attachment points where they grip the seafloor. Some fossils even show the cup-shaped body structure, where the feeding arms once extended into the current. Modern crinoids still live in deep ocean environments, but they are rare compared to their ancient ancestors. The Paleozoic era was their peak. Arizona's mountains contain the fossilized remains of their greatest success, when they ruled the prehistoric seafloor in numbers we can barely comprehend today. At number 8, we have horn corals, and they earned that name from their distinctive horn or cone shape. Unlike modern corals that form massive colonial reefs, these were solitary creatures. Each horn coral lived as an individual polyp, building its own calcium carbonate skeleton with characteristic ridges and internal walls. Arizona's Devonian and Mississippian limestone formations contain beautifully preserved horn coral fossils. The red wall limestone visible in the Grand Canyon and other mountain exposures shows these corals in remarkable detail. Each ridge on the fossilized horn represents growth patterns from millions of years ago. These corals thrived in warm, shallow seas that periodically flooded the entire Arizona region. Their presence tells geologists something crucial about ancient climate conditions. The seas here had tropical marine environments with warm temperatures and incredibly clear waters that allowed photosynthetic organisms within the coral tissues to flourish and grow. The soft-bodied polyp sat inside the protective horn-shaped skeleton, extending tentacles outward to capture passing prey. At night, they would emerge fully to feed on tiny organisms drifting in the currents. During the day, they retracted into their calcium carbonate homes for protection from predators. Horn corals grew slowly over many years, adding new skeletal material in distinct bands. Scientists can read these growth bands like tree rings, revealing seasonal changes in the ancient ocean. Some fossils show damage and repair, evidence these creatures survived attacks from prehistoric predators and lived to grow more skeleton. Finding a complete horn coral fossil is special because it represents an individual animal's entire lifetime preserved in stone. Unlike colonial corals, where thousands of polyps build together, each horn coral fossil is one creature's architectural achievement. They built elaborate homes that lasted hundreds of millions of years after their deaths. These corals went extinct at the end of the Paleozoic era, during mass extinction events that wiped out huge portions of marine life. But Arizona's mountains preserve them perfectly, allowing us to study their structure and understand the warm tropical seas that once covered this desert landscape. At number 7 is bryozoans, colonial marine animals that formed lace-like or branching structures on the ancient seafloor. People often mistake them for corals or even plants, but bryozoans are actually complex colonies of tiny individual animals called zooids, each one living in its own chamber and extending tentacles to feed. These creatures built elaborate skeletons that contributed significantly to limestone formation across Arizona. Fossilized bryozoans appear throughout Paleozoic rock layers, especially in formations dating to the Permian period around 299 to 252 million years ago. Their colonies created incredibly diverse forms, from delicate branching networks to encrusting sheets. Mountain areas containing the Kaibab Formation showcase these fossils in stunning detail. The colonies formed important components of ancient reef systems that once bordered Arizona's prehistoric seas. Some colonies grew upward like tiny trees, while others spread horizontally across rocks and shells, covering every available surface with feeding chambers. Each zooid was microscopic, but together they built structures visible to the naked eye. The colony functioned like a single organism, with each individual contributing to the whole. They filtered massive amounts of water, removing microscopic food particles, and keeping the ancient seas clean and healthy for other life forms. The variety of bryozoan fossils in Arizona is remarkable. Some look like delicate lace fans, while others resemble branching coral. Some formed flat crusts on shells and rocks. This diversity shows how adaptable these creatures were, filling every possible niche in the ancient reef ecosystems. Bryozoans still exist in modern oceans, but most people never notice them. They remain small and inconspicuous compared to their Paleozoic ancestors. But in Arizona's ancient seas, they were dominant reef builders, creating habitats for countless other species and leaving behind limestone deposits we walk through today. When you examine Arizona limestone closely, much of what appears to be solid rock is actually compressed bryozoan colonies. Millions of tiny chambers once housed feeding animals. Their combined skeletons built the foundations that other reef organisms grew upon, creating layered ecosystems preserved in mountain stone. Coming in at number 6 is trilobites, the armored marine arthropods that dominated ocean floors for nearly 300 million years before going completely extinct. These creatures had segmented bodies, divided into 3 distinct lobes running lengthwise, which gives them their name. Their hard exoskeletons molted as they grew, leaving behind numerous fossils. Arizona's Cambrian formations, particularly the Bright Angel Shale in the Grand Canyon, contain trilobite fossils dating back approximately 500 million years. These ancient arthropods crawled along the seafloor, scavenging for food and occasionally swimming through the water column above. Different species range from tiny specimens smaller than a fingernail to large examples several inches long. The presence of trilobites in Arizona's mountain strata marks some of the earliest complex life forms preserved in the state's entire geological record. Before them, life was mostly simple and soft-bodied. Trilobites brought sophisticated body plans with segmented exoskeletons, compound eyes, and jointed legs that left clear impressions in ancient mud. Trilobite eyes were incredibly advanced for their time. Some species had compound eyes with thousands of lenses, giving them excellent vision in the murky prehistoric seas. They could spot predators approaching and locate food on the seafloor. Their eye structure rivals the complexity of modern insects despite evolving hundreds of millions of years earlier. These creatures filled many ecological roles in Arizona's ancient oceans. Some were predators hunting smaller organisms. Others scavenged dead material on the seafloor. Some filtered particles from the water. This diversity made them incredibly successful, spreading to every marine environment on Earth during the Paleozoic era. Trilobite fossils are so common in some Arizona formations you can find them with minimal searching. Each molted exoskeleton left behind a fossil. Since trilobites molted many times during their lives, one individual could leave dozens of fossils. The rock layers contain countless generations compressed together. They went extinct during the mass extinction at the end of the Permian period, vanishing completely after dominating oceans for longer than dinosaurs would later rule the land. Arizona mountains preserve their legacy perfectly, showing us the diversity and success of Earth's first truly complex marine arthropods. At number 5, we have nautiloids, swimming predators with coiled or straight shells divided into chambers filled with gas. This gas allowed them to control their buoyancy, rising or sinking through the water column at will. Related to modern nautilus, squid, and octopus, these cephalopods represented some of the most advanced predators in Arizona's ancient seas. Their shells could reach impressive sizes that would shock you. Some straight-shelled nautiloids grew several feet long, making them apex predators hunting through the prehistoric oceans. Imagine a creature with a shell longer than a person swimming through waters where Arizona mountains now stand. Fossilized nautiloid shells appear in Arizona's Paleozoic limestone and shale formations, particularly in rocks dating from the Ordovician through the Permian periods. The Redwall limestone and other mountain formations contain both coiled and straight-shelled varieties preserved in remarkable detail. These predators hunted through the water using tentacles to capture prey. Unlike their modern relatives, ancient nautiloids reached enormous sizes and dominated the food chain. They ate fish, trilobites, and anything else they could grab with their tentacles. Nothing in the ancient seas was safe from the largest nautiloid species. The chambered shell design was brilliant engineering. As the animal grew, it added new chambers to the shell opening and sealed off the old chambers behind it. By adjusting gas and fluid levels in these chambers, the nautiloid could hover motionless, sink to the bottom, or rise to the surface. Their fossils indicate Arizona's prehistoric seas supported complex food webs with multiple levels of predators and prey. Nautiloids sat at the top of this pyramid, hunting everything below them. The presence of such large predators tells us the ancient oceans were productive enough to support substantial populations of big hunting animals. Modern nautilus are the last survivors of this once dominant group. They remain relatively small compared to their ancient ancestors. The giant nautiloids that swam through Arizona's prehistoric seas represent a lost world of marine predators that ruled the oceans for hundreds of millions of years. At number 4 is ammonoids, coiled shell cephalopods, that evolved from nautiloids and became incredibly diverse during the Mesozoic era, distinguished by their complex suture patterns, where the shell chambers joined together. Ammonoids developed into thousands of different species, with shells ranging from tightly coiled to loosely spiraled forms. These active swimmers were important predators and prey in marine food chains. Arizona's Permian and Triassic formations contain ammonoid fossils, though they are less common here than in some other regions. The state's marine deposits from around 250 to 200 million years ago preserve these fossils in mountain areas where ancient ocean sediments were later uplifted. Ammonoids serve as excellent index fossils, helping geologists date rock layers and understand how Arizona's seas changed over millions of years. Different species lived during specific time periods. Finding a particular ammonoid species tells scientists exactly when that rock layer formed, sometimes narrowing it down to just a few million years. The suture patterns on ammonoid shells became increasingly complex over time. Early species had simple wavy lines where chambers joined. Later species developed incredibly intricate fractal patterns that covered the shell in elaborate designs. Scientists still debate why these patterns became so complex. Ammonoids ranged in size from smaller than a coin to larger than truck tires. The variety in Arizona's fossil record shows these seas connected to broader ocean systems where ammonoids evolved into countless forms. Each species adapted to specific depths, temperatures, and prey types. These cephalopods were highly mobile predators, jetting through the water by squirting water from their bodies. They had excellent vision and could change direction quickly to chase prey or escape larger predators. Their shells provided protection, but also limited their speed compared to shellless cephalopods like squid. Ammonoids went extinct at the same time as dinosaurs, 66 million years ago. A catastrophic asteroid impact wiped them out after they had dominated oceans for over 300 million years. Arizona's mountains preserve their fossils from before this final extinction, showing us the incredible diversity they achieved. At number 3, we have fish remains from various prehistoric fish species that left their bones, teeth, and scales in Arizona's ancient ocean sediments. Complete fish fossils are relatively rare compared to invertebrate fossils, but teeth, scales, and bone fragments from armored fish, early sharks, and bony fish appear in formations throughout the state's mountains. These remains represent different evolutionary stages of vertebrate life in the oceans. Shark teeth are among the most durable fish fossils found in Arizona, appearing in Paleozoic formations where ancient sharks patrolled the seas hunting for prey. Their teeth constantly replace themselves, falling out and being preserved in seafloor sediment. Some formations also contain plates from placoderms, primitive armored fish that lived during the Devonian period. These bizarre fish had bony plates covering their heads and front bodies like medieval knights. Some species grew massive, becoming top predators with jaws strong enough to crush shelled prey. The presence of fish fossils indicates Arizona's prehistoric seas supported complete ecosystems, with vertebrate predators occupying the top of the food chain. These fish hunted among the abundant invertebrate populations, creating balanced predator-prey relationships that kept populations in check and ecosystems healthy. Finding fish teeth in mountain limestone seems impossible until you remember this was all underwater. Sharks lost thousands of teeth during their lifetimes. Each tooth that fell to the seafloor had a chance of fossilization. Arizona mountains contain teeth from shark species that have been extinct for hundreds of millions of years. Early bony fish also left scales and bone fragments in Arizona formations. These fish were ancestors of most modern fish species. Their presence in the fossil record shows the evolutionary steps that led from primitive jawless fish to the diverse fish populations filling oceans today. Fish fossils are harder to find than shell fossils because bone breaks down more easily than shell material. But when discovered, they provide crucial evidence about the vertebrate life that swam through Arizona's prehistoric seas, hunting and being hunted in food chains remarkably similar to modern ocean ecosystems. Coming in at number 2 is marine reptiles from the Triassic period, approximately 25 to 200 million years ago. While marine reptile fossils are exceptionally rare in Arizona compared to invertebrates, isolated teeth and bone fragments from ichthyosaurs and other marine reptiles have been documented in certain formations. These discoveries are significant because they represent air-breathing vertebrates that had returned to the ocean. These reptiles evolved from land-dwelling ancestors, but developed streamlined bodies and paddle-like limbs for swimming. They had to surface regularly to breathe air, yet spent their entire lives hunting in the water. The presence of marine reptile remains in Arizona's Triassic rocks indicates these ancient seas connected to broader ocean systems, where these creatures evolved and thrived. Ichthyosaurs looked like dolphins with elongated snouts filled with sharp teeth. They hunted fish and squid, diving deep and swimming fast. Finding even fragmentary marine reptile fossils in Arizona is remarkable. These creatures were rare compared to the abundant invertebrates filling the seas. Each tooth or bone fragment represents an individual animal that swam through these waters, breathed air, and eventually sank to the bottom when it died. Though fragmentary, these fossils expand our understanding of the diverse life forms that inhabited Arizona's prehistoric marine environments. The seas were not just filled with shells and primitive fish. Advanced predators patrolled these waters, air-breathing reptiles that dominated food chains and evolved into incredible diversity worldwide. Marine reptiles would later evolve into massive predators during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. But Arizona's Triassic fossils show us the early stages of this process, when reptiles were just beginning to conquer the oceans and develop the adaptations that would make them apex predators. These fossils are so rare in Arizona that each discovery makes headlines among paleontologists. Every tooth and bone fragment adds to our understanding of how these ancient seas supported life at every level, from microscopic filter feeders to massive air-breathing predators hunting through the depths. But number 1 is where everything changes. Sponges represent some of the most primitive multicellular animals found in Arizona's fossil record. Yet they played crucial roles in ancient marine ecosystems that few people understand. These simple organisms filtered water through their porous bodies, extracting nutrients and oxygen from the currents. Despite their soft tissues, sponges produced mineral spicules, tiny needle-like structures that often fossilized. These spicules left evidence of their ancient presence throughout Arizona's rock layers. While individual spicules are microscopic, dense concentrations appear in certain formations, showing where massive sponge populations once thrived. Sponges are animals, not plants, despite lacking brains, nervous systems, or organs. They represent some of the earliest complex life forms on Earth. Finding their spicules in Arizona formations tells us the ancient seas here supported life going back to the earliest stages of animal evolution. These creatures filtered enormous amounts of water through their bodies. A single sponge could process hundreds of gallons per day. Multiply that by millions of sponges across the prehistoric seafloor, and you realize they acted like massive water treatment systems, keeping the ancient oceans clean and removing particles from the water column. Sponges also created habitats for other organisms. Small creatures hid inside their chambers, escaping predators. Some species formed relationships with bacteria that helped them process nutrients. The simple sponge was actually the foundation supporting complex ecological relationships throughout the ancient seas. Modern sponges still fill oceans worldwide, largely unchanged from their ancient ancestors. They remain some of the most successful animals on Earth, surviving every mass extinction event that wiped out countless other species. Arizona's mountains contain their fossilized spicules from hundreds of millions of years ago. From primitive sponges to advanced marine reptiles, Arizona's mountains preserve an entire ocean ecosystem, frozen in stone. These fossils prove that where desert and peaks exist today, ancient seas once teemed with life at every level. The mountains remember what came before. They remember the oceans.